Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We see many people streaming in, and we are about to begin today's event. So over to my colleague Jennifer to start us off.
In our daily life, most of us come in contact with gold. We wear gold, use gold, or buy and sell gold. About 20% comes from artisanal and small-scale gold mining operations. These operations provide a livelihood, either directly or indirectly. For an estimate, due to a lack of awareness or alternatives, many of these small operations use toxic mercury, an ancient technique, to extract their gold. We know that mercury-free technologies are more efficient and produce more gold. When miners are able to use these technologies appropriately, they are safer and more productive. This also gives miners better access to formal markets that require responsible production. Planet Gold was created to bring the miners together with those who can improve their operations, their health, and the global environment. We are working with countries all over the world to integrate miners into the formal regulatory system, to help miners access new financing opportunities, to introduce mercury-free technologies and training that enable them to produce and sell more gold, to help provide for their families and their communities. We believe that when miners are able to operate responsibly in the formal economy, artisanal and small-scale gold mining provides decent, well-paying jobs, reduces poverty, and promotes sustainable development, all while creating a global supply chain of gold from small-scale miners that is safer, cleaner, and more profitable for everyone. To learn more and find out how you can make a world of difference, connect with us at planetgold.org.
Making a world of difference, to transition small-scale miners around the world to mercury-free technologies, to provide for themselves and their families in a better, cleaner, and safer way, and to make the connections all through the global supply chain, from miners to formal markets, to refiners, to jewelers and electronics, and all the way to you and me as consumers. That is what Planet Gold does. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good day, good evening. My name is Claudia ten Hafe. I join you from the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention on Mercury here in Geneva, where I'm the Senior Policy and Coordination Officer. It is my honor to take you through today's program to review and celebrate Planet Gold, a signature project of the Global Environment Facility to tackle one of the largest mercury emission sources covered by the Minamata Convention, the mercury emitted and released by small-scale and artisanal gold miners. Planet Gold, led by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, with the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and Conservation International, is a dynamic and growing program. 2 years on from the launch of the program in London, we are coming together today again, this time virtually from across the globe, to peek into what has been achieved so far and to look forward to what is coming up as the next chapter in Planet Gold. We are joined today by a remarkable set of speakers, presenters, and some guests from key organizations and key governments who each, in their own sphere, are leading a key part of this transformational and global endeavor. Furthermore, what makes today's event particularly special is that we will also connect directly to miners from Planet Gold that have already been working with Planet Gold to reflect on their experiences and particularly to share what they hope for and aspire to through the Planet Gold initiative. And right at the end, we have some news hot off the press, a very special announcement, so do stay tuned. But before we dive in, I have been asked to highlight two short housekeeping matters. Firstly, the one is that this event is being recorded. And secondly, you are able to follow the event in English, French, Spanish, and Mongolian. Just toggle to one of the other languages at the bottom of your screen under interpretation button, if you would like. And with that, I've made the introduction, but to give you an even deeper dive into Planet Gold than the video allowed us to do at the beginning, it is my great pleasure to hand the floor over to my colleague Ludovic Bernadotte to situate us where we are today on Planet Gold. Ludo has been conceptually and programmatically leading the work on artisanal and small-scale gold mining at UNEP, with all the colleagues at Jeff and elsewhere too, for some years, and he is the Planet Gold Phase 1 Program Manager. Over to you, Ludo.
Thank you, Claudia, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the participants. I will provide you with an overview of the Planet Gold program, but also some key aspects and highlights of the implementation to date. But first, I wanted to go and so what is Planet Gold? As you know, it's a Jeff supported and developed program, large program that was developed in collaboration, as was mentioned, between UNEP, UNIDO, UNDP, and Conservation International as Jeff agencies, but many other partners also contributed to the development. GOLD is an acronym for, in our case, it stands for the Global Opportunities for the Long-Term Development of the Artisanal and Small-Scale Gold Mining Sector. Next slide, please. So why do we work on this sector, and why do we focus specifically on this issue? The sector is a global issue. It's active in 80 countries around the world, employing 10 to 20 million miners. It's a huge workforce, including a lot of women and children. So it has a lot of social implication and social issues that we have to address. It is a very important source of livelihood in rural areas and often very remote areas where there are simply not alternative livelihood options. So for the miners, it's important to be able to produce gold in a sustainable and safe way so that they can sustain the livelihood of themselves and their families. However, it is often associated with negative social impact, as I've just said, but also heavy environmental impacts. It's a sector that has a lot of impact, as you can imagine, on land degradation, on river siltation, because they work very close to water courses, but also it is the largest user, the sector is the largest user and emitter of mercury to the environment. Next slide, please. So that's why we developed Planet Gold, because of the mercury issue and reducing mercury emissions from the sector, as mandated by the Minamata Convention on Mercury, which has an article dedicated to this sector. At the moment, Planet Gold is operational in 9 countries, available here on the map, but we are working at adding up new countries. There's a new set of 8 countries that are developing their projects that will come online this year, hopefully. And that will be joined also by another group of countries later on. So it will become a real family of projects, countries, from which we can really collaborate and work together to achieve mercury reduction. Thank you. Next slide, please. So the Planet Gold program is organized around 4 components. The first one is formalization. We need to work with formalized miners and mining association if we are to make a difference, if we are to really make sustainable changes in the sector. In the phase 1 of Planet Gold, we worked with countries that had started formalization. This is no longer the case for the new phases, as we will discuss. So this is an important aspect. The second component was really developed for the Planet Gold program and is really innovative compared to the previous activities, was the focus and is the focus on access to finance and access to formal markets. Miners need to be able to find the funds needed to buy the proper equipment so that they can improve their gold recovery from the current state of around 30% of gold, meaning they're losing at the moment 70% of gold to the tailings and to the environment, to better techniques that will allow them to recover much more. So accessing finance is important to get the proper equipment, but also accessing formal markets and working on shortening value chain so that miners get the best price they can for the gold that can, at the mining site, be very similar and very close to the London-based Metal Association official gold price. So that's a unique commodity in that sense, and that's what I meant by transferring wealth to the poorer communities. Gold has this ability of having a very high price at the producing site. And then we have a component, of course, on improved technologies. That's what we've been doing all these years in the past, working on exclusively mercury-free technology to extract gold, and a large component on building knowledge management, awareness raising, and reaching out to stakeholders. Next slide, please. So this is done through the program advisory group, and here are a number and a selected number of our advisors. And as you can see, we have gold refiners, we have gold users, gold consumers on board, and that have helped us. They have helped us a great deal over the last 2 years to define the gold criteria to which the gold produced from the project sites will be able to access international markets. Next slide, please. So to give you a brief overview of what has been done so far. So we've been, all the projects have been active for the last 2 years. And actually, this month marks the 2nd year anniversary of our official launch in London at the Goldsmiths Centre in February 2019. Unfortunately, you cannot meet in person this time, but I think it's important that we show the key activities that have been undertaken in spite of the pandemic that has hit us for the last 12 months. Next slide, please. So first on formalization, the first component, as you can see, we've worked in all the countries in review of the legal framework to propose changes that are needed to really support the formalization of the program. And we have identified already in many countries mining associations that will help us reach out to the miners and multiply to other sites as well. Training has started also to be provided. Next slide, please. On the access to finance aspect, again, quite a bit of progress has been made especially on the outreach to finance entities, to raise interest, to train and to train the finance institutions on how they can interact with this particular sector. We have already signed some agreements in many countries, including loan applications assistance provided. Next slide, please. For mercury-free technologies, this has also, it's an area where we've done a lot of projects in many countries. This is not surprising. This is what we've all been doing for the last 20 years. This is the more ongoing component in the program, if you want. So site assessment has been done in all countries. We've held focus group discussions with the miners to ensure that they're ready to take on board the new technology. And for that, we really insist on the increased recovery of the new technologies. And the plans and the process systems have been identified in many countries already. Next slide, please. And finally, on access to markets, So that goes back a bit to the slide on the program advisory group. We've developed the Planet Gold criteria together with gold buyers, gold refiners, to ensure that the gold produced by the program will find its way in the international markets. We've built capacity at the national level on due diligence so that the gold buyers have the assurance that the gold has been produced according to the criteria that we've set out. We've done gold trade and policy recommendations in a number of countries, and also supply chain mapping to help us streamline this supply chain, again, to improve the gold buying price at the mining site. So that's the last of the key highlights that we wanted to showcase. Next slide, please. But if you want to have more information and much more detail, we suggest that you can have a look at the annual progress report of the program, which is posted on the Planet Gold program website, as well as a shorter executive summary that's providing a snapshot of the progress of the program over the last 2 years of implementation. These reports are currently available in English, but we are doing a translation into Spanish and French. Next slide, please. And finally, of course, the Planet Gold has a lot of other resources that we suggest that you can visit and download, including guides that were provided by the global component of the Planet Gold on improving access to formal finance. This takes on from other sectors, the examples of other sectors, but also other partners that are not involved directly in the program, but that do provide guidance and assistance. And of course, the Planet Gold criteria, which I have mentioned already. I won't take too much more of your time. I think it's best, often the progress is best heard from the people who are in the field. And we do have now a video from our program managers of the 9 countries that will speak in their own words about the program progress. So thank you very much.
Hello, is this Planet Gold Burkina Faso?
Hola, bienvenidos desde Planet Gold Colombia.
Bienvenidos a Planet Gold Ecuador.
Welcome to Planet Gold Guyana.
Selamat pagi dari Planet Gold Indonesia.
Hello from Planet Gold Kenya.
Welcome to Planet Gold Mongolia.
Hola, desde Planet Gold Perú.
Hello everyone, welcome to Planet Gold Philippines.
We have an act in place. It's called the Mining Act of 2016. That is for the Republic of Kenya. It is there on paper. So I am sure with the project, we will be able to now implement and actualize the visions of that act. And by creating awareness, the local miners will be aware of what legal obligations they have. And then we're also hoping that with the help of Planet Gold, if we have a value chain where we have mine to market, where we can assure the market free golds can secure a marketplace.
2021 especially, we directly talk with the miners to increase the capacity, to increase their knowledge. We also preparing the module about how to get the permit, because this is a long story about the permit. When we now talking with the miner, they understand that they need to be formalized. Before they thought they're doing it illegal, they don't care about it. But now they already understand about the formalization is really important. And also they understand about why the mercury is so dangerous for them. Because before they don't care and they don't know about this.
nous sommes en train de développer un fonds renouvelable. Les artisans miniers pourront venir demander des prêts auprès de ce fonds renouvelable. Les équipements pour travailler sans utiliser le mercure, ce n'est pas facile à avoir pour les artisans miniers. Mais comme nous travaillons à mettre un fonds, à disponibiliser un fonds pour que les artisans miniers puissent chercher, j'ai nourri l'espoir et un grand espoir que, à la fin du projet, nous serions à mesure de mettre en place cette structure-là pour que vraiment les artisans miniers puissent demander des prêts et de pouvoir travailler dans la diligence raisonnable.
Gracias a la armonía que realizamos con algunas entidades financieras locales, logramos el diseño de un primer mecanismo financiero con entidades financieras, corporaciones financieras locales como es Confiar, quien a través de un relacionamiento estratégico nos ha permitido empezar a soñar con un primer mecanismo financiero para mineros de subsistencia. Esperamos en un segundo punto y en el tema de inclusión financiera por lo menos tener 300 barriqueros con acceso a crédito a través de estos dos mecanismos financieros que tenemos en marcha.
One of the concrete things we're looking at in the next 6 months is setting up equipment in one of the project areas that will be validated by the government. We have prepared the design, we have looked at the ore, and we're ready to install the equipment and work with the community. So we are very optimistic, COVID-19 permitting, that by the end of the year, you have a facility that's going to be commissioned in the Philippines.
En Ecuador nosotros desarrollamos un estudio TSA, un análisis enfocado de escenarios, y lo que aprendimos es que implementando nuestra estrategia de venta de mineral, que es una estrategia en la que el minero artesanal no procesa su mineral, sino que lo vende a plantas de pequeña minería que nosotros hemos fortalecido, todos los actores de la cadena tienen más ganancias, ¿no? Los mineros artesanales pequeños incluso duplican sus ganancias en un año y eliminan el uso del mercurio porque es en este sector de la minería artesanal de pequeños mineros donde se usa todavía el mercurio.
Han sido momentos muy difíciles para toda la humanidad, para todos los gobiernos. Sin embargo, es así que a pesar de la pandemia se ha podido impulsar el Plan de Acción Nacional para la Minería de Oro Artesanal y de Pequeña Escala, liderado por el Ministerio del Ambiente. Se ha apoyado el proceso de formalización minera y la reactivación económica de este sector, del sector de la pequeña minería y minería artesanal. Se han impulsado campañas de sensibilización nacional como la campaña MAPE sin COVID-19, así como la iniciativa, la campaña Expedición Mercurio.
We're actually teaching our miners, stakeholders, how to use Facebook or any other virtual meeting platforms. Now, with the technology, it's actually allowing us to meet more often. We were able to provide a lot of information to our stakeholders, the miners, about the impact of pandemic and how we could actually prevent getting infected.
Planet Gold is like it's like a community of sharing and learning, because we're talking about 8-9 countries. When we meet, when we have discussions, we can learn from one another. Every country doesn't have to do everything from scratch. There is no way we could do many of the things that we're trying to do on our own. And so I think the project is really invaluable. That's the only term I could use to explain it.
Pues como gran familia tenemos desafíos y retos, pero también tenemos la oportunidad de poder compartir experiencias, conocimiento, tecnologías, modelos de inclusión financiera, modelos de una minería responsable. Y considero que el trabajo en equipo de los 9 países va a permitir que logremos cumplir la meta y así alcanzar los objetivos del desarrollo sostenible.
reflections and perspectives on the past 2 years from Kenya, Burkina Faso, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Indonesia, Mongolia, Peru, and the Philippines from around the world. With these insights and the rich images fresh in our mind, let me turn to a very distinguished panel to take us a bit deeper on Mercury globally and also Mercury at the national level, linking artisanal and small-scale gold mining all the way up the supply and even value chain, and particularly on the role of Planet Gold in this regard. For this, we are joined from Costa Rica by Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, CEO and chairperson of the Global Environment Facility. Good morning to you, Carlos Manuel. From Jakarta, Rosa Ratnawati. Good evening, ma'am. The president of the Minamata Convention COP4 and also a director general in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry in Indonesia. It's lovely to have you with us today. From Geneva, Monica Stankiewicz, executive secretary of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. We also have Carrie George, vice president and head of sustainability and impact of Everledger. And from Washington, good morning to you, Rob Wing, US alternate Jeff Council member of the Department of State. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. And let me begin with Carlos Manuel. Planet Gold was one of the first large programs funded by the GEF in the chemical and waste focal area that instead of going the route of individual country projects, decided to create an interconnected program. Can you reflect on the value that the GEF took in this type of pragmatic approach? Now, both as you're the CEO of GEF, but also given your long and direct experience at the national level as former environment minister. Over to you, Carlos Manuel.
Well, thank you so much, Claudia. It is a great pleasure to be here, joined by Monica, Rosa, Rob, and Kat. And greetings from Costa Rica. I'm in the Peninsula de Osa, which is in the heart of gold mining, small gold mining, and the center has been our historical conflict within conservation. In this case, the protection of National Corcovado National Park and illegal gold mining, because the park is on top of a huge geologic of gold reservoir, and since 1985, and then as a Minister of Environment and Mining, because in Costa Rica the Minister of Environment is also the Minister of Energy and Mining. This is very important, Claudia. One topic that as we look forward in terms of our initiatives, we need to really understand which is the right institutional framework that we need to have in order to generate more impact in our effort to move from worst practices to best practices, all the way to technologies that are mercury free. Here you see a couple of photos. I'm the guy with the white shirt on the right hand side. That on my right hand is Gilberto. He's the lead park ranger in Corcovado National Park. That was like a month before the pandemic, in probably January 2020. I was participating in a anti-illegal mining in Corcovado National Park. On the left-hand side, you see the miners that we captured doing illegal mining in the park. I have participated probably in 12 operations of illegal mining in protected areas in Costa Rica since 1985, when I was 25 years old. I was a young guy helping create the park. And two things are very clear to me. One is small artisanal miners, they don't die out of age. They die very soon. For whatever reasons, it can be health-related issues or it can be violence, but that's a fact. And the second thing that I have learned through 30 years of working with legal and illegal small-scale mining is that they never get out of their poverty status condition. They never, nobody makes a good living out of these activities. And yes, as I remember all of this, you know, what I see here is a human crisis. This is, you know, the big takeaway message of my experience as former Minister of Mining in dealing with small artisanal. It's a human crisis. What we have is a human crisis, particularly nowadays that in many places COVID impacted many of the work that we did around, you know, generating jobs out of nature-based tourism. And here where I am right now also is a good example, because even though most of those miners are 25 to 35 years old, the sons of the old miners in the park are tourist guides right now. And because of the pandemic, they were jobless. And what happened? They went once more with illegal mining in the park. So this is illegal mining on the park. Also, I had a lot of experience in illegal mining in other places. You know, Cruzitas is a site in the border of Nicaragua. Costa Rica banned industrial open pit gold mining, but we never prepare ourselves to spontaneous illegal mining. And as we passed this regulation, a lot of informal miners coming from Nicaragua invade this site and began doing illegal mining. And the government was totally incapable to dealing with this situation. It's the same thing that you see in the Amazon basin at a smaller scale, of course. But as a minister, I was unable, Claudia, to deal with the mercury issue. Totally, I was not trained to deal with it. I was unable to track it. The mercury I knew was coming from Mexico, which were the routes. I didn't have trained people to do the enforcement. But most importantly, because even though I have participated a lot on enforcement activities to implement the environmental law, and I'm a strong believer of the environmental rule of law, this is a human element, and people do these activities based on their needs or the lack of opportunity. So we governments, we need to come up and be able to present solutions. And two key elements in this other side were key lessons that I want to bring into our Planet Gold effort, which is one is how do we formalize them? We need to formalize them, and it's not as you know, sending a sociologist or an expert to gather them and make a co-op. It is way complicated because individualism is within the heart of what they do. They are totally exploited by somebody else, and you know, this illegal mining activity are really associated to drug trafficking, human trade, and diseases. You know, malaria was something new to us. In 50 years, it was brought by illegal immigrants. And I'll finish with my last point here, Claudia, which is the fact that, you know, when I, as a minister, I began doing sampling of the soil and the waters on mercury, it was extremely, extremely high and dangerous. And I didn't have any, as government, any capacity to go and clean up the site. And of course, as a minister, I got the political opposition and the Congress and many others on my neck asking for short-term magical solutions. There are no short-term magical solutions when you deal with small-scale artisanal gold mining. There are not short-term solutions. So here are two messages for today. One is, we need to understand which are the right institutional frameworks we need to promote at the country level to be able to have long-term lasting solutions. This is to say that the ministers of environment and the ministers of health are the ones who are really interested in this issue, not necessarily the ministers of mining. And in the case of Costa Rica, where you had mining and environment in the same agency under the same minister, things were relatively easier than what I saw in Nicaragua or what I saw in the rest of Latin America, where you got a Minister of Mining that is only thinking on industrial large-scale mining. And those issues regarding artisanal are things that are kind of politically alone. And then how do you go from dealing with a mercury problem on the side to a mercury-free technology? I mean, that process, we need to be right there with the countries, helping them going from worst practices to best practices, and then into mercury-free technology use. I want to finalize that, we need to put attention to those who are way beyond informality, which are in the illegal realm, risking their lives, and working under extreme conditions where human rights are not respected and they are totally exploited. Because yes, we were, because for us in these last few years in this partnership, which by the way has been extremely successful, we've been working with those groups that has been kind of easily accessible because they are there. They are not formal because they don't have a legal condition, but they're easy to find and engage. I'm also thinking on those who are deep in the jungle, out of any possibility for us to really do outreaching and contacting. We need to bring them together. We need to have a strategy as we look forward. So thank you so much, Claudia, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Carlos Manuel. Also in particular for shaping it in the pictures that you showed in terms of what it looks like and how it was not only in Costa Rica, but also in the neighboring countries. So with your permission, if I may take us across the globe to Indonesia, to a large country, one of the largest in the world, the third largest Asian country, a very diverse country as well. Rosa, your country is part of Planet Gold. We would love to know a bit more about how do you reflect currently on Planet Gold and its ability to help Indonesia with this mammoth challenge and the benefits that you can see for your country. Please, Rosa.
Thank you very much for your question, Claudia. First of all, allow me to say good evening from Jakarta and good morning, good afternoon to all of you. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to the organizers of this event for inviting me to this important and timely event. It is my great honor to join with this distinguished panel of experts. Indonesia is thankful to be selected as one of 9 partner countries of Planet Gold. Planet Gold plays an essential role to support countries' commitments to the Minamata Convention on Mercury, particularly in eliminating mercury from the supply chain of gold from ASGM sector. The Planet Gold project in Indonesia, called the Integrated Sound Management of Mercury in Indonesia's ASGM or ISMIA, has directly supported Indonesia's attempts to eliminate the use of mercury. In 2019, the President of Indonesia issued a presidential decree on the National Action Plan on Mercury Reduction and Elimination. The decree sets a target to eliminate mercury from ASGM sector by 2025. In that context, the Gold ISMIA project has assisted us a lot to achieve that target. The project helped us formulate regional action plans for the reduction and elimination of mercury at the provincial and regency level, provide inputs on technical regulation on ASGM sector, develop mercury-free technology, create innovative finance models, provide capacity building to miners, and gradually assist them toward formalization. The current pandemic created some challenges in delivering the outcome of ISMIA project in a timely manner. Site visit, field work, project monitoring, and engagement activities have become more difficult with travel restrictions. I and my colleagues at the Indonesian Ministry of Environment and Forestry have discussed these challenges intensively with UNDP Indonesia office, who is responsible for the implementation of Planet Gold project in the country. I would like to ensure that the government of Indonesia is committed to supporting the project and helping it accomplish to the targets on time. The Indonesia government will continuously support the implementation of the project through innovative ways in this difficult situation, such as pursuing online and face-to-face workshops with strict health protocol and maximizing local government roles in supporting activities at 6 project sites across Indonesia. The government also assists UNDP in ensuring that the process of permit application to implement this project, such as waste management permit, environmental impact analytical permit, and building permit are fully fulfilled. I believe that by the end of 2023, when the ISMIA project will end, we will be able to achieve significant progress in many areas, such as more robust regulatory framework, more comprehensive capacity building plans and guidelines for ASGM miners, financial schemes to support transition towards mercury-free technology and formalization of artisanal miners, gender mainstream in ASGM communities, and the creation of alternative socio-economic activities for ASGM miners. Those achievements will provide a strong basis for Indonesia to progressively move towards a more rigorous approach and policy to eliminate the use of mercury in ASGM sector, and in line with our National Action Plan and in accordance with the Minamata Convention. Thank you, Claudia.
Thank you very much, Rosa. And following on from Carlos Manuel, you provided, in fact, that government view back again in terms of how to try to look at all of the different challenges that face any person or any government trying to address what are legitimate livelihoods, but what are also important constraints and challenges. Thank you very much, Rosa. This allows me now to go a bit closer to home, which is to invite Monica, the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Mercury, to ask Monica if you could reflect how the program, such as Planet Gold, supports the convention overall, or put differently, how can the work of that program complement also the work of the Secretariat to support parties? Please, Monica.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Good day. Thank you so much for the event and for having me to speak. It's a really pleasure to be with you, and let me recognize my co-panelists. Carlos Manuel, thank you so much for sharing your professional experience, but also personal thoughts. And thank you, Madam President, for your commitment and Indonesian commitment to the project and to the convention, and for leading the way. And I'm looking forward to hearing a presentation and contributions from Carrie and Rob. Today in the morning, I actually watched the video that you, Ludovic, has been showing us today. And as it often happens when working remotely, my 6-year-old son heard me watching something and he came in. And it was the first time actually where he showed a real interest in what I do professionally. I was able to explain which are the countries, what's happening on the pictures, who are the people, and it was a really special moment for me. So I would like to really thank not only for this magnificent material, but also for all the work of the agencies, of the countries, and all the people involved in the program. You are really making a real difference, and I'm really honored to be part of this journey. Back to your question, Claudia, the Global Environmental Facility is set forth in the convention as part of our financial mechanism. And Carlos Manuel, you have heard me saying it, but the convention and the GEF is a perfect match. On one hand, we have a blueprint with a well thought through and actionable measures. And on the other hand, we have a funding mechanism that enables a major and transformative change. And we both of those want to make the world a better place to live. As Secretariat, we work very closely with the GEF Secretariat and agencies to ensure that all of its Minamata Convention investments are completely in line with the treaty and with the needs that we are hearing from the parties. I see Planet Gold as a very good example of a program that is fully in line with our convention. As many of you know, the convention intentionally addressed the use of mercury in artisanal and small-scale mining in a flexible and non-punitive way, understanding that if the convention simply banned the use of mercury in ASGM, the risky work would be driven further underground. And that would not get us anywhere. Many people are earning their livelihood from this work. So the convention calls for a real and lasting change, and that is what the Planet Gold is working to deliver. Programs like Planet Gold provide practical examples and experiences to parties that are now working on strategies under the national action plans. Madam President provided one example. Each party that has a ASGM that is more than insignificant is required by the convention to put in place national action plan. And we have so far in the Secretariat received 11 such plans. And the parties are not only see the need to implement them, but they really do so. So the action plan is not a document that is put on shelf or on a website and that's it. And the visible progress within the Planet Gold creates an incentive for other parties to get their national action plans in order, as no one wants to be left behind. And there is also a close relationship between the Planet Gold and the Global Mercury Partnership, so we can continue to use the existing well-established multi-stakeholder partnership and platform to further enhance the reach of the program's dissemination. And to conclude, Claudia, let me say that the investments such as within the Planet Gold move us forward collectively and globally to meet the goal of the convention, which is to protect the human health and the environment from the emissions and releases of anthropogenic mercury. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. And you've made the perfect link in many ways to the next speaker. So thank you very much for that. Speaking of making the links and drawing in all the different sectors, Carrie, may I turn to you next to double click us into the perspective from the private sector. You've been engaged in responsible sourcing at both an electronics company and also at Jura. And so you have firsthand experience with the challenges, but also the opportunities to establish responsible, trusted, traceable supply chains of a given resource, in our case now gold. From the point of view of a buyer, from your point of view from the private sector, what are the most important actions Planet Gold can take or is taking to facilitate this? Be very grateful to hear your views. Over to you.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, particularly among such distinguished panelists and hearing their contributions. This work is absolutely essential. A little background. So as you said, I've been in the electronics industry at Apple for over 5 years, and then the jewelry industry for several years now, but particularly working at a key startup jewelry company in San Francisco that has quite a presence, particularly among new millennial buyers in an industry where a lot of buyers are going to other consumer goods. As such, I've had a good experience with what does it take to actually bring new material into the market and continually buy from what could be considered in many companies a high-risk sector. Gold, and particularly artisanally mined gold, is one that buyers in the downstream, let's say a company like Apple or Brilliant Earth or other jewelers, still don't know how to buy effectively from the most legitimate or the most progressive organizations. Fair Mine and fair trade has not grown enough. to be able to meet market demand, nor has there been an approach that allows for that scaling. So I'm going to name a couple of key points that I think were really critical areas for us to be able to address other material supply chains, and I think could be brought into gold. As you guys are looking for being able to demonstrate Planet Gold progress, and particularly mercury reduction, and promote and incentivize those actors in the field to actually continue with that work, there needs to be a link that they're getting the incentives that match the end consumer demands. Right now, the biggest organizations that are managing gold certifications, so from a conflict minerals perspective or from an anti-corruption or know your consumer, you can't search by mercury. So that's a problem. There should be linkages with these main actors. That was a critical tipping point in terms of material sourcing, where we started having different types of, let's say in a technical world, interoperability among tools and technologies, but in this case, among standards and projects on the ground with compliance activities that are maybe midstream. It seems very distant. It's a critical link that has to be made. And if we can start selecting by that, you'll see a massive shift in terms of downstream producers' understanding of these issues and their interest in them. And that can go into future co-development with and co-funding projects with the GEF and other organizations that are working on these things in the field. I would encourage that in a way that can be done and coordinated among those organizations, among leading companies that have already done projects on gold and activities. And we'll see a consortium and collaborative effect from that. Moving forward from that, what we also see is different types of equivalencies among programs. It's very overwhelming for companies downstream to try to purchase from so many different types of artisanal mining projects. They don't know where to engage. And actually the first time I got involved and started connecting with the GEF was in an effort to do some sort of co-funding and understand where I could target. There can be more done there because there's a lot of companies just wanting to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, in terms of this work, and being able to find the right types of facilities to do that that can actually influence their supply chain will be important. And finally, putting some of the terms and language that will make sense for companies that they're already having to do. So sustainable development goals, making those impact data possible, making it something that can be digested easily. So really long reports are not particularly welcomed all the time in the private sector. So we need to simplify, 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 and make it just something that can be done as part of normal operations. But those are just a few high-level aspects that I think would be really important. And we're looking at this from both a technology perspective at Everledger, as well as a different type of government and private sector partnership opportunity with different companies in different fields. But when we look at different ways to manage and pull in data, whether that be in a narrative report or different impact metrics or sensor data that can be done in the future, I think we can see some real scaling effects with this type of public-private partnership and technology. I'll hand it back over to you.
Perfect. Carrie, you finished on partnerships, and that's exactly where I wanted to pick up the ball and throw it over to Rob. Rob, the United States has had a long history of supporting work on reducing global mercury pollution in general, but also ASGM in particular. And as first party to the Minamata Convention, I remember that day very well. Why is mercury so important to your government, and how does Planet Gold complement your bilateral efforts? Over to you, Rob.
No, thank you very much. And first, I just want to say thank you for having me as a panelist here. And I'm super honored to be on this panel with Carlos Manuel and Rosa and Monica and Carrie, and also Claudia, you and Ludovic. It's just an honor to be here and to be able to talk about the work we do in the US on this issue. It's a pleasure to be here with you for this conversation about Planet Gold, which has been one of the flagship projects undertaken by the GEF in support of the Minamata Convention. As you said, the United States is proud to have been the first country to join the Minamata Convention on Mercury, which is in excellent hands under Monica's stewardship. We look forward to joining Rosa and others at the 4th Conference of the Party of Minamata, hosted by the government of Indonesia. And we are proud supporters of the GEF, of the work the GEF has done from the beginning in support of implementation of the Minamata Convention. This enthusiasm carries over into our work with the US government. In addition to participating in the design of the original GEF Gold program, and now currently on the program advisory group, many US agencies, including the State Department, USAID, and the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Labor and Interior have been actively working and collaborating on projects in the ASGM sector. Some of our bilateral and regional efforts on Mercury, like the Mercury program run in my office in the State Department, the Office of Environmental Quality, are great places to test new ideas and technologies relevant for ASGM, develop relationships and build capacity. For example, in Suriname, we are working with 2 large-scale gold mining companies to improve their working relationships with ASGM sector and testing out a modular processing equipment constructed specifically for alluvial mining, and which can be moved from one mining site to another once the ore has been exhausted. The Planet Gold program complements our efforts by translating the most up-to-date scientific ideas, technologies, and approaches into action within the countries enrolled in the program. By taking on much of the capacity building work, Planet Gold also provides space for the United States and other GEF donors to launch projects that anticipate future issues that will impact mercury use. These donor-led projects are in themselves complementary to Planet Gold work and have much more potential working from the Planet Gold Foundation. And I think just to maybe more directly answer your question, I think in the beginning you talked about some of the statistics that 20% of gold comes from ASGM, and that there's ASGM mining in 70 countries in the world, and that I can't remember the other, that there's, I think, 45 million people working in Planet Gold. I don't have that statistic written down in front of me, or working in this sector. So it's an incredibly large sector that cuts across the entire world. And there's all sorts of issues that we've heard about today that are important from all sorts of different perspectives for the US, from a national security perspective to an economic development perspective. And also a lot of gold that gets released in the environment ends up in mercury that gets released into the environment ends up in the US. So there's all sorts of different reasons why this is important to us and why we're very proud to be the first party to the Minamata Convention, and that we continue to do our own bilateral work and support Planet Gold. So I'll stop there for now. I'm super short. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely helpful, and just listening to all of you, it's very, very clear that it requires many hands, it requires many heads, and it requires quite a few hearts to put together such a multifaceted program, and then to take it into all these different places, whether it's in Indonesia, Rosa, or whether it is Carlos Manuel, into the areas or you're closest to your home. So with this, I just want to mention to everybody, we will hear a bit more from each of the panelists at the conclusion of the event. But now, if you allow me, I would like to hand the floor to the men and women who mine for a living, from Kenya to Indonesia to the Philippines, Peru, and Mongolia, to each, in their own words, highlight their hopes and their aspirations for Planet Gold.
We started mining a long time ago. Since we started mining, we have been mining with the old techniques. We have realized that we are using mercury, which is very bad on our lives. It's really affecting our lives. Again, since we started mining from our forefathers, we have never been legalized or formalized. We're actually requesting the Planet Gold Kenya to give us all the alternatives of mercury to use so that our lives are not ever affected again, and again to help us formalize our activities so that we can work legally according to the Mining Act 2016.
Bantu kami agar dapat menjual emas dengan harga yang tidak merugikan kami, dapat memahami proses penjualan emas yang semestinya dengan harga yang sesuai pasar.
I'm exposed to mercury, and I would like this program to help us and give us an alternative. I've been working with mercury for over 10 years, and some of our ladies have been infected, and that is why I want the program to help us and give us a quick alternative.
Kami tidak mau generasi kami nanti menerima dampak dari merkuri yang kami gunakan sekarang. Bantu kami untuk memberantas rantai pasok merkuri yang datang dengan memberikan kami modal. Mohon pemerintah dapat membantu kami dalam mendapatkan izin dan akses modal untuk kami dapat membangun peralatan pengolahan emas yang tidak menggunakan merkuri lagi.
Bantu kami meninggalkan merkuri dengan memberikan dukungan peralatan yang aman, pembiayaan untuk ahli teknologi, dan izin dalam melakukan kegiatan pertambangan.
Орчин үеийн шинэ технологи одоо хөдөр боловсруулах цех манай орон нутагт ингэж баригдсанараа за одоо мөнгө усгүй эко алтыг бид үйлдвэрлэж орчин үеийн шинэ технологи одоо нэвтрүүлсэн энэ цэхээр үйлчлүүлж цэвэр алтаа дэлхийн зах зээлд Монгол орныхаа зах зээлд гаргаснараа бид за тэр үр шимээрээ бид өөр одоо бизнес эрхлэх ч юм өөр ажлын байр нэмэгдүүлэх тал дээр бас үр дүнгууд гарнаа гэж бодож байна.
And we hope with this approved Minahang Bayan together with this Planet Gold, working together, we might come out with the best practices where all the structures, the miners will be registered, everything will be put in place. Hopefully, it will be considered as a legitimate livelihood for a certain area.
Soy representante de la pequeña minera Oso Polar. Es una minería artesanal, quizás en camino a la formalización, pero quisiera dar el mensaje al mundo que las minerías pequeñas no solamente destruyen el planeta, como muchos dicen en las noticias en general. Tenemos el conocimiento de cómo cuidar, digamos, el medio ambiente. También trabajamos con seguridad y eso es mi mensaje para todo el mundo, que no quisiera que lo vean del lado malo, ¿no? Siempre que la minería pequeña destruye, ¿no? Pero también no. Siempre nosotros también ponemos mano al pecho y por nuestra familia, quizás por casos económicos estamos trabajando y también nosotros cuidamos el planeta, no es que siempre destruimos. Y eso nomás. Muchas gracias.
While Planet Gold is a relatively young program, the GEF has had the foresight to work on ASGM programming for some 20 years. May I turn to Juha Oito, Director of the GEF Evaluation Office, to give us a short reflection on the GEF interventions in this sector. Over to you, Juha.
Thank you very much, Claudia, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I would first like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this important seminar, which has been very interesting to me, as I'm sure it is for all of the participants. I'm glad to have this opportunity to say a few words about the evaluation of GEF interventions in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector that my office, the GEF Independent Evaluation Office, recently conducted. I'm also glad that the evaluation did confirm some of the points that have been made by the earlier interventions. The evaluation performed post-completion assessments of outcomes for 3 medium-sized projects from the GEF5 period, that is from about 2010 to 2014. As Claudia said, there were projects in this field much earlier than the Planet Gold. And these projects were all focused on ASGM mercury reductions. In many cases, we found that mercury use fell already during project implementation and has continued to fall since then, which points to some encouraging signs of sustainability. Having said that, the switch in these cases was largely from mercury to cyanidation, which is obviously not a technology promoted by the GEF or Planet Gold for that matter. One common lesson that from these older projects was that most miners struggle to access finance from regular legal sources because the sector is not formalized and is often associated with illegality. This makes the miners unable to invest in project-promoted non-mercury technologies, even if they wish to do so. The gold program, which for the GEF represented a significant increase in investment in the ASGM sector, has responded by making access to financing and markets its largest component, as we have heard. So they are testing the hypothesis that more financing will lead to more transition to cleaner technologies. There has thus been notable learning from the past experiences with older GEF-funded projects in moving towards these newer interventions. To promote broader adoption of its work on access to financing, the GEF will still have to expand its activities, assisting governments in implementation of formalization policies in the artisanal and small-scale gold mining sector, broadly recognized as a critical step for solving many of the sector's problems. Overall, the artisanal and small-scale gold mining provides a good opportunity to continue the GEF shift to a more holistic, multifocal area, integrated programming, and to connect with health interventions, given the broad range of issues faced by this sector. The GEF should also seek to link ASGM and its chemicals and waste focal area funding more broadly with other focal areas such as biodiversity conservation, international waters, and land degradation, at least in certain geographies. So the full evaluation report is available on our website, and I'll put that link into the chat. It was there earlier, but it doesn't hurt to repeat, I guess. And that's all I've got to say at this moment. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Juha, and we will see the links, and any other links we will also, of course, make available after this event as well. So we've looked at the past, and now it's time to look towards the future. Planet Gold is set to expand, and I'm delighted to turn to Miguel Morales, the Senior Vice President at Conservation International, to speak to the upcoming chapter for Planet Gold. Please, Miguel.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this presentation. what I'd like to talk to you about is what is next and how we're going to be expanding the wonderful, very positive work that the Planet Gold initiative started. And in that regard, so we are expanding from 9 active projects that Ludovic mentioned before to additional 8 countries. And if you can go to the next slide, please. So we are working now. If you look at the map, the areas in gold are the countries where the Planet Gold is already working. There are active projects. And we're expanding now to 8 new countries, the ones in blue on the map. And what I'd like to do for you today is give a very brief presentation, some highlights about the new countries that we're bringing to this initiative. I'll be talking only about 2 countries per continent and highlight some of the major things that we're going to be working with. All these projects are currently under development, and we hope that within this calendar year, we're going to be submitting the product for these child projects, as we call them within the initiative. Next slide, please. So in the Americas, we have 3 new countries that will be joining the Planet Gold initiative: Bolivia, Honduras, and Suriname. I wanted to highlight for Bolivia, for example, that the ASGM sector is one of the main sources of exports for the country and is very important for the economy of Bolivia. One of the issues that I also wanted to signal here is that not only mining and the exposure of miners to mercury is a problem in the country, but also that Bolivia has become or is becoming a regional hub for informal trade of mercury within the region. And we hope that that also will be one of the topics that the country will address or start addressing through the GF project. In Bolivia also, small-scale mining is driving deforestation, and we need to start thinking about how to bring together topics such as land use, biodiversity conservation, and livelihoods in a more safe way. For Suriname, which is a very small country with a lot of forest still, at least 50% of the annual gold production comes from the ASGM sector. That's a very high percentage of all the gold that's being produced in Suriname. And it's also important to signal here to mention that about 40,000 people rely on this sector in Suriname for their livelihoods. In addition, in Suriname, there are issues of illegal people coming from neighboring countries, the garimpeiros from Brazil, for example, along with the Maroons, which are tribal peoples of African descent, are the main people mining in this area. And we really are working with the Child Project from Suriname to address some of those issues, if not all of those issues. But these are long-term problems that will require long-term investments, not only from the GF, but from other donors. Next slide, please. In Africa, we're developing projects, new projects in Ghana, Nigeria, the Republic of the Congo, Madagascar, and Uganda. But I wanted to bring your attention to 2 countries here. They're all very important, but given the constraints of time, just wanted to mention that Nigeria, for example, 90% of the gold production comes from artisanal and small-scale miners. There are about 500,000 people that depend on this activity for their livelihoods. That's remarkable. That's very important. And we have to remember that in Nigeria, relatively recently, the country experienced a rare case of combined contamination in this sector, where miners were not only exposed to mercury that they used to mine, but also they were exposed to lead that coexist within the ore where gold is found. So there are many issues that the child project for Nigeria will be addressing. And again, it's important to mention here that when we talk about mining, especially in this sector, the artisanal small scale gold mining, we're talking about multiple problems that need to be addressed. And hopefully the initiative will continue to do that because we are already doing that. And the other country that I wanted to mention here is Uganda in Africa. This sector employs or is currently occupying 30,000 miners. And this is the topic that I wanted to mention. In some regions, the mining is largely done by women, and especially in alluvial mining areas. And in this country, between 20 and 30% of the workforce in the mining sector comes from children. And there is an urgency for formalization and also alleviate these issues in Uganda. Next slide, please. The new child projects or countries that are joining the extension or the next step, next phase of the Planet Gold initiative. One of the issues that we really want to emphasize is the formalization of the sector. And we're gonna be piloting what's called, it's a landscape approach, but it's based on jurisdictional boundaries, such as municipalities, provinces, or states. And what we're trying to do is bring together different stakeholders at the subnational level to be able to talk about issues that have to do with the environment, social issues, policies, and economic issues. And the main, or one of the focuses will be that the government will have to be present in these jurisdictional approaches to drive the next steps in this initiative. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, what is the jurisdictional approach? Jurisdictional approach have been used in production and more sustainable production of other commodities, especially in the agricultural sector. And what we're trying to do is apply this framework where the boundaries of the landscape are defined actually by government administrative boundaries. As I said before, there can be states or provinces or municipalities where governments, local governments, alongside with the central government, are willing and have the political will to work on formalization and the other things that we will continue doing with the Planet Gold extension. The objective here is to bring together different stakeholders that have different interests and different uses of the land and the resources on the land, and try to reconcile environmental, social, economic interests. And again, the center point is that different stakeholders, the private sector, the rural people working in different aspects of the production, and local governments will come together to set an agenda, define the plans, and implement the plans to make the initiative more sustainable. And another point that we want to explore is the sustainable gold sourcing for a commodity that's produced within a very determined region of the country. That's what we're trying to do with this, piloting this approach. We're not saying that every single country in this next step is going to pilot this, but we are going to do everything we can to provide the training, the capacity building, the tools to incentivize the formalization of the sector. And as Ludovic said, many of the countries that are included in the first part or the first phase of Planet Gold were already in the process of formalizing the sector. Now we're including other countries that have to start doing this as a way of improving the use of the mining of gold in this sector. Next slide, please. The jurisdictional approach also is a very good complement to the supply chain management. What we're trying to do is bring governments and align the interests of the government with the interests of the people living in these landscapes, in these jurisdictions. We, as I mentioned before, is a framework where multiple stakeholders will participate, and we're going to try to make sure that different interests, different stakes in the land and the resources are represented within the plans and the execution of those plans. Jurisdictional approach is also very good at bringing production and conservation for multiple commodities, not only gold mining, although the Planet Gold initiative will concentrate and we will use gold as the platform. Our intent is to look at the landscape or the jurisdictional landscape in a more holistic way, such as production of agricultural commodities, and be able to thrive towards a more sustainable production overall. And what we're trying to do here also is to have a greater impact at scale instead of going mine by mine sites. Next slide, please. Some of the potential benefits of this approach that we will be promoting during the expansion, the next phase of the Planet Gold phase, is trying to increase efficiencies by working at the landscape jurisdictional levels with multiple mining sites within these landscapes. And thus we can avoid the cost of going mine by mine approach that can be more expensive and also less efficient. We're trying to, or we will continue doing the establishing the direct links between markets' interest and the government policies and enforcement. We want to address more prominently co-benefits, and those co-benefits can be, for example, better watershed health, conservation of biodiversity, for smart mining, and many other co-benefits that we can leverage using gold as an entry point for these initiatives. Another one is that we can also take a more focused look into human health and additional commodities, as I mentioned before, and improve traceability, because we only need to trace the origin of gold within that jurisdiction and not individual mines. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide. And during this new phase, the global coordination project, what we're going to be doing in terms of the jurisdictional approach is three things. Capacity building first, because the jurisdictional approach has been, as I said, has been applied successfully to other commodities, but we're trying to apply this to the sector that is our interest in this initiative. And we're going to provide capacity building through webinars, series, and topical presentations, the development and deployment of tools and methodologies to make sure that those countries that want to embrace the jurisdictional approach have the tools and the ways to advance their projects. And finally, product review, consultations, and knowledge sharing. So that's from my end, and thank you very much again for the opportunity to give you the flavor of what is coming, and it's coming pretty soon because the new 8 country projects are right now in development, full development, and we hope that before the end of the calendar year, they're going to be entering implementation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel. I think you've given an excellent flavor of what's to come and also explained the jurisdictional approach quite well. You might see in the chat box, there are all kinds of comments there for you to peruse. We will move on now because I did mention earlier that we had a special announcement at the end. So let me call on Ludo one more time. The floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you. And it was a great moment to listen to all the panelists and speakers. And as was mentioned many times, the outreach and communication and educating a bit the public on what the choice they can make when they buy gold, so that it really makes a difference at the mining site, at the people who are really needed the most, is really important. I think there's a slide coming. So yeah. So as was mentioned by Selim in the chat, I don't know if many of you saw it at the beginning. We've been working with Aurum Monaco for a while now in the Planet Gold program and in the Global Mercury Partnership. And they have invited us at an event organized by the Better World Forum around the Cannes Film Festival this summer in July in the south of France. And the event will be a whole day event with many partners that are involved in the Planet Gold program, talking about ethical gold, again, to really make some efforts to talk to the public and to inform the public on how our choices can influence the miners in each of these mining sites and countries where we are operating. So we will communicate more on this event. This is just an announcement, but we're really looking forward to participating in this. Thank you.
Perfect. Ludo, thank you very much. When we can't travel to some of these wonderful regions, we can certainly live through them or live in them through art of movie and art of visualization. And certainly films are a way to shape new ideas amongst people. So this is a remarkable and very, very good move. Congratulations to all of those involved. So this leads us to the end, the final thoughts, and I would like to turn to our panelists one more time, just with a small caveat to say that Rosa has had to excuse herself. It's quite late in Jakarta, as you can imagine, and she's had to do one more official engagement tonight. But I would like to turn to Rob, Carrie, Monica, and Carlos Manuel in that order. Can you share a sentence, a final sentence reflection with the audience as a way of a take-home message after today's meeting, after today's discussions? It could be something that you would like to add that hasn't been said, or something you'd like to reiterate, or it could be something new that maybe you only thought of or realized today. So Rob, if I may start with you.
No, thank you very much. And this has been an incredibly informative and educational program today. So thank you for all of the speakers, and thank you for all of the panelists and all of the presentations. I'm super impressed, and I know I've learned a lot, and we've been working on this issue in my office for almost as long as I've been there, 15 years. And just really quickly, I just want to emphasize a few things. One is, this is really important work, really excited to see what is planned for the future. We need to continue to do this work. It is a huge, pervasive issue that truly needs a global approach. And I think that Jeff is the best place to do it. The one thing I want to do is just emphasize the importance of communication and information sharing. I think that's key, but I don't think, and I want to double down on what Carrie said earlier, that doesn't mean big, long reports. I don't think that helps anyone. So I love the idea that you're going to be at the Cannes Film Festival and be doing an information sharing and, sort of like getting the word out about this at a place like Cannes. And also something that Carrie said related to the, making sure that the buyers know where to get gold that's mercury free and how to do that. Just from a personal perspective, one of my nieces is a jeweler. She makes her own jewelry, and she's super successful in Denver. And she is always on the lookout for mercury free gold. And so I know this from a personal perspective that it's not always easy to find. So I think connecting the markets is super important. And I'll stop there. Those I think are the things that I'd like to end this with. Thank you very much. Incredibly good program.
Thank you very much, Rob. And over to Carrie.
Yeah, I'll just underscore everything Rob said. Really couldn't be more grateful for this event. It's so timely. As we're looking at a post-pandemic, how do we really engage and re-engage with supply chains that maybe have languished or have been put on hold. Now's the time to really start engaging the private sector. From my perspective, there is a host of different types of collaborative opportunities that are going on to actually do this type of communication and to connect the markets. So I would encourage all of us to make sure this isn't this is the first of many conversations, not the last. And so if we can get together, continue the conversations, really find the opportunities to connect these supply chains and these amazing programs on the ground with the people that are doing the work, as well as the NGOs that are supporting the efforts on the ground, we will be able to go much farther and pull this all the way through to 2030 and 2040 and 2050 goals.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Carrie. I would have called on Monica, but she's literally just entered a consultation about our COP preparations. But she asked me to point out and just to remind of the article a little while ago that mercury was even found in the Mariana Trench. So really, we have mercury. We have work to do on mercury everywhere, don't we? But with this, let me call on Carlos Manuel. Please, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Claudia. And it's very difficult to me to say in a couple of words everything that I have in my mind and to react to the many interventions, because this topic is very close to my mind. I will do my best. I'll bring 3 topics that I tend to believe that are extremely, extremely important as we look forward into the future. The first one is, yeah, I totally agree with you all that jurisdictional approach is a right investment. It will give us long-term benefits. It's going to be very challenging, but also we need to put a dose of reality when we're talking about, doing the jurisdictional approach, because there's a new element. The baseline has shifted from the first phases of Planet Gold to today, and that is because of COVID. So any new regulation, any new improvement and enhancement of the legal framework will be confronted with the fact that people are suffering the aftermath, if I can say so, of COVID-19. So no need for new regulations. And that means that this can be a setback in our aspiration to phase out the use of mercury and other hazardous substances. That I'm saying that there will be a more political opposition because of a very simple economic rationale. So we need to be able to be prepared to provide data and the know-how in that political narrative. That's the first point. My second point is, yes, we all agree that going from informal to formal is important. But also there's a even deeper, more complex issue going from illegal to legal. Yes, informal is not legal, but we don't call it illegal. We call it informal. But there are real illegal activities like gold mining in a protected area. This is a no-go area, no-go. But how do we deal with those 2 things when most of them small-scale miners are not rooted with the area? There are migrants. They don't trust they don't trust government. They don't trust the middleman. By the way, the middleman is the one who provides them with mercury and buys the gold. They don't trust the NGOs. They don't trust anybody. So how do we go from that very specific individualistic circumstance into something that helps us, providing, assisting them to trust in the system, to trust in us, to trust in the stakeholders, and be able to facilitate that formality is a challenge. And I tend to believe that we got a lot of very interesting examples in Ghana, Uganda, and Suriname, and many other places at a very slow scale. So how do we share the knowledge of those processes? So that's this other element. Knowledge management is a key issue. I think that we need to raise the profile and the investment that we do in terms of knowledge management. And the last but not least element is the fact that, yes, our goal here is to deal with mercury, this very toxic substance, and be able to formalize them. But we shouldn't, in that process, we shouldn't lose our ultimate responsibility, which is protecting nature and the environment. We can be great in focusing ourselves, in phasing out, this toxic substance or substances, and be dealing a lot of things that we may lose also the perspective that some of these activities, even though they are going from worst practices into best practices, continue to generate a lot of water pollution, a lot of land use change, a lot of impacts. So I tend to believe that here we got an opportunity as we look into the future on Planet Gold, on the co-benefits in terms of climate change, mitigation, adaptation, in terms of biodiversity conservation, even in terms of the land degradation convention. So the integration, the need to integrate these more into that other agendas is great, because the way we extract gold has a huge impact in biodiversity. We need to recognize that, at the same way that the Convention of Biological Diversity needs to understand that they need to work closer to us, because there's an impact, a direct impact on how we extract and manage and process gold and minerals in the earth biodiversity priority. So that's the other element that I wanted to bring up here, the environmental impact components that we need to be aware. We work with governments on that, but I tend to believe that as we look at that in the context of the main objectives of Planet Gold, we have here an opportunity to do more a holistic, integrated approach that can generate co-benefits in terms of the other conventions. Thank you, Claudia.
Perfect last words and perfect way to end this event today. During the last 90 minutes, we've traveled the world from cold places to hot places, to dry places, to lush places, high places and low places. Our wonderful planet bears its bounty of gold in very different places in the world, and Planet Gold, through formalization, market-free technology, market access, mercury-free technology, I beg your pardon, market access and financing, allows for women and men, the women and men that we met and many others too, to make a transition to earn a more legitimate and safe livelihood, and to address the human story, as Carlos Manuel made clear earlier, for the good both of the people, but also specifically also for the good of the planet. Thank you for spending this time with us today. Over 200 of you joined to review and indeed celebrate Planet Gold and the many hands, heads, and hearts that bring this program to life. My name is Claudia ten Hafen. It's been a delight to be with you today, to learn with you, to learn through you, and to hear the thoughtful speakers, the presenters, the miners, and all the guests that are contributing also on the chat. Before signing us off for today, I would like to just send a very big thank you and a shout out to a number of wonderful colleagues that are behind the scenes who have made this all possible today. Let me start with Susan Keene and Jennifer at the National Resource Defense Council in Washington. Thank you very, very much. To Rocio and Jerome and colleagues at UNIDO in Vienna, and to the team at Arrowheads Films for the video productions. And also want to say thank you to the very nimble interpreters whose job I never envy, but very, very much appreciate. We look forward to linking with you all soon again. Get in touch with any of us or all of us if you'd like to know more, if we can be of help. And until then, keep safe and well and keep making a world of difference. Thank you and goodbye.